One of the vocabulary words is an extruder. An extruder is a tool which moist clay is loaded and then pushed through a shaped opening in the end to produce coils, blocks, or cylinders of clay. What you see here is an extruder. I'm going to show you how to use it. Next week when we do clay, all of the students will be able to create one coil of clay for themselves, but we're going to use teams because the leverage is a little hard to have one person do it. Here's the extruder. What you do is you're going to put clay inside the extruder. Underneath I have bolted in a die cut that has four holes in it, and then a plastic piece that goes over the front, so it only allows you to do one type of coil. You can make other things besides coils. You can do cylinders or rectangular prisms, but for today, for our clay pots, we'll be doing coils. When you have the clay in there, you're going to lift up the lever, put this part down, and then it's going to take two people to push down the lower part because it's hard. You want to go until it's about an inch off the floor. You don't want to touch the floor because it has, well, dirt, and you don't want that. Take the coil, and you're ready to do your coil pot. To make your coil pot, you need to choose a size for the bottom of your clay pot. There will be two choices. You can have a small one or a large, and you don't have to have it be a circle. You can make it into a square, a star, whatever shape you like. For this demonstration, I'm going to choose a small one. You're going to take a paper towel, so you'll be working on the paper towel, and take your bottom. Then you're going to make a coil using the extruder in the storage room. This is what one coil looks like. Make cross-hatching lines on the top edge of your base and on the coil to attach them together. The easy way of doing this is taking a fork, and you want to do hatch lines in one direction. They create like nubbins. I just take those off and put them in a nice little pile for later. I can recycle those. Right there is just hatch marks in one direction. You need to do cross hatching in the other direction. And then you need to do the same on your coil. When you cross hatch, you need to make sure you go in deep enough so it'll attach to itself. If all of you want to take your hands and put them like this, if you have no cross hatching and you push your hands together, just like two coils or a coil in the bottom, and you don't cross hatch, when the clay starts to shrink because the water evaporates, it will slip apart and you'll have coils that are separating. If you cross hatch nice and deep and then push it together, you have to, in order to lock it, you have to push it together, which we'll talk about later. Right now, if you just set it on, and when it shrinks, it still can come off because they're not locking. So when you push your coils together, it locks it in place, and then your clay pot won't fall apart. Next, before you attach your coil to the bottom, you're going to add just a little bit of water. A little water goes a long ways. In the high school, you'll be using slip. Slip is basically regular clay that's been put in a blender, and it's really slippery. It's kind of like mud, but for clay. And it works like glue, bonding the pieces together. Since we're not doing a large piece, a little bit of water will work just the same for us. Next, you're going to lay your coil on the edge of your base. When you first start it, you want to get the end right in there, push it down. You don't have to tear it apart. I did for the reason, I'm going to show you a different technique here in a moment, but you can keep going around. Let's say I'm done with that round. I'm going to smooth it out. You need to push the coils onto the crosshatch lines on your base. Then next you're going to push up the sides of the base to make a solid seal on the base. So I'm going to pull the base here up a little bit. And this will help with, so there's no leakage with the bottom of your clay pot. And it will look nice and finished. For time's sake, I'm not going to go all the way around it right now. I'm just going to go ahead on this side so you can see it before and then how it's nice and smooth when it's done. You're going to put, once you have some of your walls finished, you can smooth out either the inside or the outside of your coil pot to help connect the coils. I like doing the inside because if I chose to put any food in here, the food could get stuck in the cracks and stuff, so I like to smooth that out. Using your hand for support on the outside wall and your nail is a great tool to help bring that clay down. Again, due to time, I'm not going to do the whole piece, but you can see how the inside looks nice and smooth on this side. When you add the next coil, don't forget you need to cross hatch for the next layer. If you want to have your clay pot go straight up, you add a little bit of water and put that next coil on. If you want your clay pot to start going in, for example, this coil pot, the top part is going inside. What you would do is instead of cross hatching on the top, you cross hatch on just the inner side of the coil and put it on the inside a little bit. I'm going to do half the clay pot that way so you can see. So you can see how it's starting to curve inside because I'm putting that coil on the inner side there. I've chosen to smooth out the edges because I had too many cross hatches. If I had not cross hatched the top, I would want to smooth out the inside. And if you take a wooden tool, if you don't like the cross hatch marks and you want that, you still want the pattern of the coils, you can take a wooden tool and smooth out crosshatch marks. So you'll retain the coil pattern. Okay, these I've kept the pattern of the coils. If you want your clay pot to go out, instead of going up on top or on the inside, you would crosshatch on the outside. I'm just going to smooth that out so you can see what it looks like. Again, add a little bit of water, make sure both pieces are cross-hatched before you start, and then you put it just a little bit on the outside edge and push it down. Again, you need to decide if you want it to have the coil effect or if you want to have it smooth. So you can make your coil pot go in, you can make it go out, you can go straight up with it. Those are just a few examples. Also, you'll notice that one coil didn't go very far on this. I didn't thin it out at all. If I had taken my coil and just squeezed it, I can make it a little bit thinner. You don't want it any thinner than your pinky, otherwise there's a good chance it could crack. And you don't have to have it circular. You could have it flattened out. If you want to flatten it out, and then your clay pot can be taller. Also, if you start with, even though I started with a small base, you can make this base smaller. You could cut out a triangle or just make a smaller circle. You have the option of making more of a plate or a bowl, depending on what you'd like to make. This is if I flattened it out a little bit, and then I could go up on the wall here. Again, crosshatch before you would attach this. Now this clay pot that I'm demonstrating on doesn't look like a real clay pot. It's just demonstrating different techniques that you can do with your clay pot to give you some ideas. Again, if you were to crosshatch, the nubbins get everywhere. These little clay balls. All those clay balls add up, so save them in a pile and then we'll put them in the recycle bin. And if someone from the class remembers where the recycle bin is for clay, not paper, go ahead at this time and point to where the recycle bin is. It should be it is by the timekeeper timer. And if you open up that drawer, it's in a white bin. When you start getting layers on top, you'll notice if I push down, my walls would go out. When you're pushing down, use your hand as support, either on the outside or on the inside, depending on where you're pushing. And that will help your piece from falling apart or falling out or bowing in. The back of your nail is one of the best tools to use when you're connecting the different layers. And maybe you want a clay pot that doesn't hold water, but has holes in it, and you can smooth out. No one says you couldn't have a clay pot that purposely has a pattern of negative space and positive space. Again, when you get done towards the end, you want to make sure that you smooth out any rough edges, because these nubbins will get sharp later on. So I want to come in here. And this one's kind of a thin tool. I might want to get a bigger tool and a little bit of water. So you can see how I smoothed that out on this side, and I haven't smoothed that out on the other side. When you get done with your layers, with one coil, you can make a decision. You need to look at the time. If you have at least 10 minutes left of class, you can go ahead and get another half coil. Every student has the opportunity to get 1.5 coils. If you don't use all of 1.5 coils, you are welcome to share your leftovers with a neighbor. Or we can recycle them as well, and I can use them for another class. Continue basically building up your walls until you run out of your first coil or until you're done. When you're totally done with your project, you want to flip your project over. Now for the first day, if you have all your late work in, you'll have 2 days to make a coil pot. I would recommend you taking your time so you can make your design that you want. The first day, after we're done with the beginning part, you're going to get a paper towel, and not the one that you were working on, but a clean one. You're going to write your name on it, get it wet, and squeeze out most of the water. Then put it in one hand and put your clay pot in the other and bring it up to me. I'll put it in a plastic container that will keep it moist for the week. And then the week after, you'll come back and get your clay pot and finish it. When you get towards the finishing stages, make sure that you have some texture or a pattern of some sort. You are welcome to keep the pattern of the natural coils, or if you want to add textures into it, I used actually my wedding ring to create that texture. Anything on the second shelf of the cart you're welcome to use for textures, or if you have a texture at home that you'd like to bring in, maybe part of a necklace or earring, go ahead and bring that in. As long as it's washable, you can go ahead and push that texture in. I've even used random objects around the house, like leftovers from the plastic part of a cookie bag, or not bag, but a tray, and created a bumpy texture using that. Again, random objects can create some interesting textures in your clay pot. You can have it smooth. For the most part, you need to create some sort of pattern once you smooth it out. Create some sort of pattern if you'd like. Or I would like you to create some sort of pattern and the texture could be smooth, is what I'm saying. Okay, let's go on. Once you're totally done, flip your clay pot over carefully, and you want to put your name. Let's say your name is Nick. I'll write your name lightly so it doesn't go through the bottom, and your last initial. And again, wipe off the nubbins from your name because those will get sharp later on. And then you're going to write 6 dash and then whatever classroom. If you're from Hartman's classroom, it would be 6-H. If you want to put the year on here as well, go for it. 2012. That way you can remember what year you made it if you don't remember what year you were in 6th grade. So you have your name on the bottom. When you're totally done, you'll want to put it upside down in the box by the sinks, and that will let it air dry out, and I can also double check that I can read your names. Tips that are important to remember when creating your clay pot. Make the walls in the bottom of your clay pot the thickness of your pinky, otherwise there's a good chance it could crack. If you goof up, ask the teacher for help. Do not crumple up your clay and try to start over. You'll most likely have an air bubble and it will explode in the kiln. Make sure you have a pattern on your clay pot. Remember, you have to repeat something 3 times or more to create a pattern. Do you have your name and class on the bottom of your clay pot? And if you have a lid, you're welcome to make a lid if you have leftover clay. Let's say you're making a smaller clay pot and you want to create a lid. Make sure if you have a lid, you put your name on the bottom of that as well. But you can squeeze it out so it's a little bit thinner. And you're going to coil it like a snake. Again, you'll need a cross hatchet. Add a little bit of water. And then coil it together. Now you'll notice you'll need to cross hatch the opposite side because it's going to be rolling on itself. Lots of nubbins. As you go along, don't forget to add a little bit of water to help connect it. So right now we're just pushing the cross-hatched lines together. If your cross-hatched lines disappear as you go because maybe you're smoothing them out accidentally with your hand, go back and put them in. Make sure they're pretty deep so they'll bind. Some people will say, Mrs. Banks, I did cross-hatch, but they didn't cross-hatch deep enough. They just cross-hatched a little bit, and when you pushed it together, it just didn't lock well enough. So make sure you cross-hatch pretty deep so when it locks, it will be locking together nice and tight. Okay, so if that's going to be your lid, let's say, oh, there we go, kind of matches that one. I probably would want to put one more coil on it to be a nice lid for this piece. You want to smooth out the edges. If you like the coil look, you can leave one side with a coil. I would recommend, if you're doing that, go back and get rid of the nubbins, and you can even emphasize the coil look when you go back around. You can see kind of in the middle where I'm highlighting that and smoothing out the cross-hatch lines that are seeable on the edge there. Kind of looks like a snail. Now, if you don't like the coil look, you're welcome to smooth it out on both sides. You do need to smooth it out on one of the sides. So that way, again, right now it's just sitting there like this. You need to, when you smooth it out and squish it together, it locks it in place. So on this side, I'm going to use the back of my nail or my thumb. In this case, my clay is pretty wet, so I can use my thumb. If your clay is starting to dry up on you, use the back of your nail and push that clay together, and that will help bond it. Now, if you want to add a handle to it, you're welcome to do so, or if you just want it as a lid that sits lightly on top, you can. Maybe this is the inside because I like the coil on the outside. For adding a handle, and again, you can add a handle on your coil pot over here as well if you'd like. You would want to make the two ends flat, and you need to cross hatch the two parts together, or both parts that you're going to be doing. Add a little bit of water and push it down. It's really important to use your hand for support so your handle doesn't flop over, and also use the back of your nail to push it down together to bond the two pieces together. If you remember in 4th grade when we did our pinch pots, that's been a couple years, if you don't push down on the handle and smooth it out, there's a chance it could fall off. Plus, it looks nicer when you smooth it out. Now, when I did that, I kind of lost my coil effect, so I can go back in there and see if I can find that coil texture or coil pattern in there again. And maybe I want to take that coil pattern and create that pattern up my handle. I'm going to, even though the handle's not a coil, I can give it the illusion of it by adding those lines, continuing from my coil pattern on the actual lid and go up and around. Sometimes to get other textures, I think someone brought in some twine that you can wrap around it to do that. Do not currently have twine, but I have other textures in here you're welcome to use and search to find. But yeah, actually twine, if you brought in twine and wrapped it around and pushed it in, it would create that circular pattern, and you can go all the way around your handle. So this side has not been pushed down, and if I was to pull this, it does come off fairly easy, because even though I've cross-hatched, I have only done this. I have to push it together to bind it together. So if I was to try to pull this side, it's not going to break as easy. In fact, it probably will break above the connection. I'm pulling pretty hard. Okay, there we go. Yep, above the connection. So you'll see how if you connect it well, it won't come off hardly at all. Whereas if you don't connect it or push it together, there's a good chance it can come off. Even though you cross-hatched, you have to push it together to bind it. So those are some ideas. You can have lids, you can have handles, you can have handles on the lids, you can have handles on the sides of your clay pot. You can have them on the top here, on the side here. You don't have to have handles if you don't want to. This coil pot, I made it look like a pile of rope, and I ended the coil, looks like kind of lazy, but I did cross-hatch the different parts. This coil pot, I made the top of the end of the coil look like a snake coming up. This one was done by a student. They just made it simple and went straight up with it and ended it nice and even with the side. This piece has not been glazed. This has only been bisque fired. So this is an example of one of the smaller pieces. This piece was also done by a student. They did not like the coil, so they smoothed out the edges on the outside as well as on the inside, and they created their own pattern on the outside. And that's it. Clay expectations. You need to keep the clay on your table or in your hands when you're working with it. If I see anybody misusing the clay, throwing it in the air, or using it in inappropriate ways, you will lose the opportunity to work with clay, and we'll have to do a clay report instead. Work with your hands, not your voice. When you're talking, a lot of times your hands stop moving. Sometimes you're able to work with your hands and talk at the same time. However, your neighbor who you're talking to is not able to do so and ends up stop working on their work and ends up talking to you instead of working on their project. So it's best if our voices are off or to a whisper if you're helping each other out, and it should be pertaining to the art piece at hand that you're working on. Cleaning up the clay. Everyone put unused clay in the white bucket to be recycled. If you're going to continue your project next week, pick up a paper towel and write your name on it. Get it damp and bring both the paper towel and your project to the teacher to be placed in a plastic bin for next week. Gophers. Put all the textures, so all of the wooden tools that you may have borrowed, any other textures that you may have borrowed, the forks should all go back on the second shelf of the brown cart today, or next week. Cleaners, wash the table with the sponge once, then rinse out the bucket and sponge and wash the table a second time. Rinse out the bucket a second time and stack as a pyramid so the buckets don't get moldy. The bottom row of the bucket should be up and open. The second row will be upside down so they can drip out. If we were to take the first row upside down, it makes a seal on the table and it gets kind of nasty smelling underneath. So all these nubbins that I've gotten from cross-hatching, those can all be recycled. I would scoop those up in your hand, take all your clay that you did not use, and bring it over to the recycle bin, the clay recycle bin, please. All clay should be returned that's not being used, so that way I can recycle and use it for another class. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to open your journal to a clean page, and the sub will tell you what your journal assignment is. My recommendation for the journal assignment is to get it done as soon as possible. If we have any more time at the end of class today, you're welcome to work on it during class. Make sure you draw 2 different clay pots from 2 different points of view. I would recommend from the top looking down into it and the side. The bottom doesn't do much because everyone's is mostly flat with your name on it. So do the front and the side. Also, write down what colors you want it, or you can color it. You're not going to color in class today, but if you want to color it with color crayons or colored pencils at home, you're welcome to do so. Write down the colors that we have for your options this year. And don't forget to add a pattern and a texture. The texture can be, write down texture smooth, texture bumpy, texture rough. Choose a texture that you want your clay pot, and then choose a pattern. You can have the pattern of the natural coils, that's a pattern, or you can create your own pattern. If you look at the example on the smartboard, the teacher will go through some examples that are drawn on there, and you can, and also don't forget to include a handle if you want a handle on there. Put the handle, when you look down on it, it's just going to look like a lump here. If you look on the side, it's going to go look out like this on the side, or something like that. Okay, go ahead and let's take a look at your journals.